Well, last week I had mentioned that I ordered a different tenon auger that's usually in fence work to try to work up these spokes down a little bit so my regular tenon auger would work. Well, it showed up and I've been kind of playing with it. I think it's going to work. I did finish putting all the bevel on all my fellow sections. I haven't drilled all the holes because I'm kind of thinking maybe I should wait till I get all my tenons cut. There could be slight variations in them, and I may have to have different drill bits for different size holes. So I'm going to wait till I get a little closer to getting all these tenons cut. Well, I did get 2 more tenons cut. And this is the new tenon auger that I got that's for making furniture or post rail fences. Well, since I'm trying to move this point down to line up this tenon in the right angle, my tenon cutter tends to hit just on the top side of these spokes at first as it starts that process. So when I used this new tenon cutter, it was just kind of banging off the top because of the different style cutter. So I found in the last couple that I did, it works well if I use this cutter to start with, get it in a little ways, and then that other tenon cutter shoulders up much better. So this rail tenon cutter only cuts 3.5 inches deep, and I'm trying to cut 4 inches. So it comes within about a 1/2 inch of my mark, but it only leaves about that 1/2 inch that really works my spoke style tenon cutter. And I guess that's going to help anyway. It only got a 1/2 inch that really works it. But our end result is putting our tenon pretty well centered in that spoke, and that was the whole goal. Well, all that squawking and squealing that you hear is from the spoke rubbing on this face right here. And that is all governed by this point. The point of this cutter has to be just fractionally inside this edge to prevent that drag and hence that squalling. So I'm going to take and move this in just a smidgen. It's not much. The position of these blades is just super sensitive. I can just barely feel it past that edge. See if that'll help it some. So we'll see if this helps any. Still cuts hard, which is pretty expected, but it didn't have that squeak and squall. That's nice. Over the years, all the number of people that I've had come in and help, and I generally will steer them toward wheels because it's the most repetitive, easy thing for me to teach. Setting that knife on the tenon auger is probably the most frustrating thing that any of them experience. It's super sensitive. Well, that was my last one. I'm down to where I have the lower level of the 12 spokes all done. Well, this fence rail tenon cutter does help remove material. The drawback is that I'm cutting white ash, and it's pretty hard wood. Where most of the time I'm speculating that these are on pine, maybe cedar, juniper, that type of a fence, and it's probably not near as hard to cut. This still works it, but it does help. It's kind of a three-step process. A little bit with my tenon cutter, then remove some material, and then finish it with my tenon cutter. But I think it's going to save my drill. I'm really not sure how this could be designed differently. They have kind of these concave cutters on them, and they slide in and out for their depth gauge. They recommend these being in the range from about 1/8 of an inch to 5/16. I set these with a 5/16 dowel, put it across and set them in for distance. Well, you can see that they have both opened up. And that's kind of a drawback here. It relies strictly on the tension of this bolt. And especially when I'm cutting really hard lumber like this white ash, it has a tendency to just kind of kick that back. So I've had to adjust that a couple times. My 5/16 is kind of sloppy in there. The second thing is the depth gauge here. I would like to see that more adjustable. It is this portion here that cuts that is the most aggressive, and if I could diminish that height a little bit, it wouldn't grab that cross grain quite so severely. There's probably many of you that use these. This is my first time for this. So there is another style besides this concave surface here, one that comes out at a 60-degree angle. Maybe that would be better. I can see where those blades would be easier to sharpen. These look like they would be difficult to sharpen. And I've done 12 spokes, and already I can see some reflection on that edge. I'd like to sharpen them a bit, but I'm not sure I have the file or the stone to do that. We'll see. They do recommend right out of the box that you take sandpaper and rough this face up so that this gives this blade a little more to grip to. I did that. They recommend 150. I actually did it with 80 grit, and it still tends to slide a little bit. So anyway, this is Lumberjack brand. I bought it from Lumberjack, and I think it's going to help. It's not the ideal, but I think it's better than what I had. Well, a number of the reviews that I read when I was looking up this type of a tenon cutter recommended that Loctite be put on these locking bolts to keep that blade in place. So I'm going to do that, and I'm also going to take and just put a little dab on the blade itself so that it might adhere a little better to that surface. It might help that from slipping quite so bad. Got my 5/16 dowel in here to set the gauge so that both blades are the same. I'm going to give that a shot and see if that'll help. Kind of about so. And I did take my chainsaw file and I just touched up this upper edge. So just to make that just as sharp as it could be, should help that cutting action. Well, since I was pulling these bottom spokes up into place, I did loosen the bolts off of this bottom flange to allow them to move a little bit. And I left the top flange tight so that I could have a sturdy surface to pull one spoke up against two solid ones. I'm going to do the reverse. I'm going to retighten this bottom flange, and then I'll have two spokes down here that I'll be able to pull one top spoke down, and I'll just loosen that top flange just a little bit, just to allow that spoke to come down a little more comfortably. This was actually a lot easier to work on when it was vertical. I'm trying to rotate this, it's hitting my post. I'm going to take that post off. I got to make a different height one for the top spoke anyway. Then I can tighten that flange up. That should work. Let's see how that works. So now with my top spoke coming down, this is going to be the shoulder of my tenon. This is going to be the center of the spoke where I want the tenon to be. I have this lined up with the center of my tenon auger, which will line up with the center of the hub. I did raise my post, so now it rests on that post, and I can bring every spoke down to this position, and they should all be the same. Difference between the bottom spoke and the top spoke is this 1/2 inch, so I just shimmed it with a 1/2 inch block. Raise this up to where it's now in the correct position for the top spoke as it comes down. Now the bottom spokes where I have a little stronger bevel where I tried to build that up, but it was really non-purposeful. It's just going to be the opposite for these top spokes now. The bevel is going to be on top and this closer edge is going to be on the bottom. So it should work just the same as the bottom spokes, it just looks like the tenon's going to go the other direction. Well, I've been picking away at these top spokes and I've got 11 of the 12. I'm down to my last one. And there's been a few things that have kind of surfaced. As a general rule, these top spokes have had to come down further than the bottom spokes have had to come up to bring them in line with my tenon cutter into the center of the hub. Not quite sure why that is, but that's kind of been consistent through all of them. And I also learned that I need to double check my marks where I had them marked initially with my board here. When I brought these down, it changed the position of that mark, so I've had to recheck all of those and make sure that I have the correct lengths. And on this rail cutter, when I put the Loctite on the face of the cutter, that seemed to make quite a difference. I've cut all of these, and with my 5/16 dowel for a gauge, they seem to have stayed right there. So that was a big plus. My edge is doing pretty well. I did sharpen the blade on my other tenon cutter, I think twice. It really makes a difference whether that is just really sharp or not. It's got a lot to cut. And occasionally I have to kind of double check the point because it'll start squeaking a little bit. But I did sharpen that twice. Now on this 2x that I'm pulling the one spoke against two, since I'm coming up underneath, I did find it was advantageous to clamp these into place instead of just holding it by this one clamp like I was able to do on the other side. So this should be our last one. Well, it looks like this three-step process is going to work, and I think it's going to save my drill. I've cut a lot of heavy tenons with this drill, and it's pretty powerful. I think we're okay that way, but I just didn't want to tax it beyond what it was really intended for. So I have 24 more spokes to do when I do the second wheel, but this kind of helps me go through the process of what will work. I remember when I was a young child, my parents used to have these little trivets that they would hang on the wall, and they often had sayings on them. One of them that I remember said, "Kissing doesn't last, but cooking does." You know, that type of thing, usually cute little sayings and all that. They had one on their wall that was maybe a little more sarcastic, and my dad thought it was funny, my mom didn't. But it said, "Behind every successful man is a woman telling him he's wrong." Thankfully, I don't have that experience in my life. You know, Diane is more than supportive. But I was looking through the owner's manual of this fence rail tenon cutter, and there was a picture in there that said, "This is the correct way to do it, and this is the wrong way to do it." Well, as you've seen, I've done all these spokes wrong. But it works. It's what I needed. I thought it was just kind of cute, and it brought back that memory of my childhood. Anyway, appreciate you following along, and we'll continue on, and next step is figuring out how to put these fellows on. Appreciate you watching.